folks. I'm Will Lombardi, and I'm here at Capitol Arts Gallery in downtown Quincy. And I'm with the Artist of the Month for September, Debbie Kercmar. And we're going to talk about her art and some of her background. And welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you.
It's nice to be here.
We got to talk a little bit off camera, but just reading your bio, you came from Southern California, you've been here for the last few years.
Yes.
And you're planning on staying.
I'm planning on staying.
So it's nice to have your work here with us. I suppose the place to start is with your background. You told me you were self-taught. So
Yeah.
where does your interest in art come from? How did you begin making your own art? When did you decide you were an artist?
My life's been kind of funny. I was always into photography, really never into art, into photography, into crafts, arts and crafts. Later, I started a scrapbook store because I did crafts and photography together, and I had a store and I was selling pieces out of my store, and a lady from Toll Painting came in and wanted to buy the parts, and she's like, well, can you come teach classes, scrapbooking classes? I said, sure. Next thing you know, I was taking toll painting classes and I started painting. And I think within a year I was doing murals and faux finishing.
Can you tell me a little bit more? Because the scrapbooking thing, I think, is fascinating. Why did you start that? And then you just had an entrepreneurial spirit.
I did, I guess. I've done a lot of different businesses, actually. The scrapbooking, I think it brought the photography together with, the paper crafts.
And that was enough.
And that was just fun for me. And my kids were young, so all of it just worked together. But then once I started painting it, I just took off and I just loved it.
And I don't understand toll painting, I'm sorry.
Toll painting is, you trace the image on, and it's very simple. It's not real detailed. It's a base color, a highlight color, and a shadow color. That's all you do. So it's really simple, but it was a great place to start because I had never really painted before that.
Did you incorporate some of that work into your early scrapbooking? Was there a moment where you were painting and...
I went from one to the other. So pretty much when I started painting, I stopped scrapbooking. And then I painted
And you haven't returned to it since?
No, I haven't.
What about photography?
Photography, I want to say 5 years after I started painting, I got into photography again, and I did portrait photography. So I did a lot of high school seniors, a lot of weddings. I had a studio with lights, so I did studio work too, a lot of newborn babies, pregnancy, all those kinds of things. And I did that for 10 years.
So this was art as business. At the same time, were you pursuing photography as a fine art beyond the work of your business?
A little bit, but not really. It was more portrait. I did other photography, but not really as a sales. Just more as a hobby.
I guess I'm thinking this through then. Photography and scrapbooking and painting. Your paintings do have a photographic feel to them. They have a very deliberate realism to them. And hopefully we'll get to talk about it when we look at a few of these. But what's the phrase you use in your bio that's posted down there? Like a soft realism?
Soft realism, I think is what's, well, when I started, it was acrylic. And the murals and all of that were acrylic. And then when I started actually painting on canvases and things, it was acrylic. A lot of flowers, realistic. And then I did that for a while, and then I stopped painting for a while and did the photography. And then I came back to painting when I came up here. So I've really once I started here, I started with acrylic again, but then I went into watercolor, and now I'm doing some oils.
What was the drive or desire that moved you from photography to painting? Why haven't you, for example, moved here with your business?
I think just creatively I get bored
Uh-huh.
and I flip to the next thing,
Yeah.
and I drop the other one, and then I'll go back to
I
it
can
again.
appreciate that,
Yeah,
right? I think a
yeah.
lot of people can.
Yeah, I think just a creative thing, it just has its cycles.
So do you spend your days now sort of driven by your creativity? Do you have
Yes.
that latitude?
Yes, I would say since I've come up here, I would call myself a real artist because I do paint more now than I ever have.
You mentioned that this is all without training. Have you entertained taking classes, or are you happy as a self-taught artist?
I talk.
What are the advantages and disadvantages?
There's early on, my ex-grandma-in-law was an artist, and she told me, she says, don't take art classes, you're doing great. You don't want him to change you, you want to be you.
Was she an artist, you
And
said?
she was an artist, and she got me painting, you know.
What kind of work was she doing?
She did everything too. She did
Yeah.
acrylic, oil, and watercolors, but back in those days I was just acrylic. I didn't want to branch out into anything else yet.
And I do want to talk about
Yeah.
that succession, because that is kind
Yeah.
of the progression that many artists take, right?
Yeah,
Watercolor's
yeah.
more forgiving and it's cheaper. Acrylics are a little more. Is that correct?
I think acrylics are the hardest
Uh-huh.
out of three. People say watercolors is hardest for me. Watercolors was easy following acrylic.
When you set out to paint, do you have a purpose in mind? Is your purpose simply to render the object?
Usually I have a subject. It's either a picture I've taken or a reference I found. And that's usually my inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, do I want to do it in oil? Am I trying to go a little more impressionistic, or am I trying to be more realistic? You know, what's my style?
What determines that?
How I feel.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Halfway through,
Intuition.
do you feel differently?
Usually not. Yeah, usually the beginning's the hardest for me, and then once I get going, then it just flows.
Do you have your own workspace?
I do.
Are you bringing along several pieces at once, or do you start one and finish one?
I usually start one and finish one. Once in a while, I'll pull one away. If I'm kind of having a hard spot and I can't quite get it, I'll put it aside for a bit and work on something else. But normally, I work on one till I'm done, because I'm the type that I got to get that fixed. I can't just let it be. I want to get it
man,
fixed.
that's wonderful. And it does seem to me that your themes all have to do with nature. And your biography actually talks about spending time in nature as a child in Southern California. And so many of us up here don't think of Southern California as this natural space.
And I grew up in the country in a small town.
Uh-huh.
That used to be a retirement community with a lot of ag, and it's not so much that way anymore, but it was. And that's why I like Quincy so much. It reminds me a lot of what my town used to be.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so that informs your subject matter.
I like nature. I like flowers. I like landscapes. I like animals. I like painting the eyes of the animals. Is my favorite part.
I hope we get to talk about some of this
Yeah.
stuff, because as I did look through what's on the wall, these are portraits. Is that fair to say?
Animal portraits, I guess. Yeah.
And there's very little landscape.
Yeah, I've just recently started doing a few landscapes.
So
I didn't bring
can
them
you
in
talk
here,
about
but-
that a little
Sure.
bit?
Sure.
And even now, point us in that direction.
Kind of my newest, where I'm trying to kind of learn and go toward, is a very impressionistic, almost abstract but not abstract, landscapes in oil, which is hard for me because I'm more of a realist. So,
Yeah,
so
so
I'm just
what's driving
trying to,
that?
I just like it. I
Uh-huh.
like Yeah, when I go and I look at paintings, that's what I like.
Do you feel like that's having the space and time to think differently or larger, whereas before
Yes.
you limited this because this is what you could accomplish?
Yeah. I like the more imaginative, not copying the reference, completely being able to just kind of paint what I feel.
Yeah, we've had some tremendous artists that I've gotten to speak to in this way come through the gallery in the last year or so. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but it does feel like, it feels like all of us, perhaps coming out of the isolation of COVID, et cetera. But is it fair to sort of suggest something imaginative is happening, or there's been a change in the way you're thinking that is in turn affecting your art? Or am I pushing too hard on that?
I think it's just I get bored with one thing and I want to do something different. I just like the change, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, so what I hope we'll do is perhaps allow this to be a stopping point, and we'll get to look at some of these. So for our audience, what we'll do is maybe look at this progression that you're talking about. We'll pick 2 or 3 pieces and do that. Thanks so much. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good
really
getting to know. We're standing in front of Debbie's watercolors, which you forgive me, you said you began?
I began about a year ago.
And you have these, and it's interesting to me because I can see domesticated animals, local wild animals, and then the more exotic. Would you speak to anything you'd like about these images? And then B, I am kind of interested in your choice of subject.
I just really like all animals. It really doesn't matter. I think it goes by the reference that I find. I know in the photographer in the past, there's an image that I like or don't like. And I look for that when I'm looking for my references. So that, a lot of them work well in little kids' rooms or baby rooms. I like the little kind of baby animals.
And I love the way you have your gray squirrel and your rooster. Rooster? Chicken? Rooster?
I think it's a rooster.
Posed. What determines that?
Like I said, it's a reference that I found, and it's a look that I like. I know when I like it, or I know when I don't. And I love the way this one kind of went around. And the head's in the middle, which is usually a no-no, but it works really well in that one, I think. Yeah,
no, I enjoy these quite a bit. Is there anything else you want to tell us about your technique or the learning process?
Watercolors is just fascinating. I love working with the puddles of water, and I find it very fun and very relaxing. A lot of people, but for me, I feel like it's very forgiving. I think this one was so fun because I had to leave so much white, and so just kind of making the feathers go around was really fun.
I love it. Thank you. So Debbie, we've moved down the wall.
We have.
We've moved from watercolor to acrylic, but these are actually acrylic pourings, and they're fascinating.
Yes.
So maybe you'd tell us about technique with these two bears.
Acrylic pouring is fun. I've been playing with it a little bit, and I just started, and then I decided to paint on top of them once they dried, and it gave it kind of and then I poured the white back on top of the bear after I painted it. But this is done with the paint. You pour the paint on in a line, and then you drag it. And so this was dragged up, and then this was dragged down. And once you drag it, it blends and it makes the little bubbles. And then from the top, I poured more paint and I dragged this down. And that made that top part.
It doesn't look heavy on the canvas, though.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't put it on real heavy, and you can turn it and let it pour off. It's a messy one, but it's fun.
But the bear's the focus.
But the bear's the focus.
And this is perhaps the bear at night.
And this is the bear at night in the forest. I tried to do the green and the blues. And then when I went to paint the bear on, you can kind of see, I left the bear, it's just almost outlined.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I did the eyes and the snout and the nose, and the eyes glow.
What is the impetus for using this method? What was it that drove you to present these bears in this way?
I think I was just doing the pour painting, and I decided I wanted to paint on top of them, my animals. And for some reason, this period of time, I was painting bears, and I even have more bears at home. I enjoy painting them. So for some reason, both of these got bears.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we've moved from watercolor to this very specific form of acrylic, and now we're in your oils that you have displayed here. And one of the things that you mentioned in passing in our conversation was that you feel with the oils you've gotten more impressionistic.
Yes.
Can you tell us what you mean by that? And
Sure.
then also I wanted to pause here especially because we had identified that you're not doing a lot with landscape. Here we are. We've moved beyond,
Yes.
I suppose, portraiture and into
Yes.
this.
Yes. I really enjoyed painting this one. For one, the big nose.
Oh,
it was a
super
little
fun.
It was a little concerning early on and how to paint such a big nose, but it was a lot of fun. But the background being loose, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoy that with oils.
And in terms of more impressionistic, can you flesh that out a little?
What do you mean?
Meaning by definition.
Oh, yeah, it goes back into the way they used to paint, where it wasn't actual, it was oil, but it was looser.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not getting the details in.
And the lack of detail in something like this, yet the remarkable detail on something
On the nose.
on a nose, what drove that?
I wanted, and this is a photography thing, where you have your focus and then you blur the other things. So I really didn't want this to be detailed. I wanted the focus here and here.
So you're taking your background as a photographer and now translating it in oils.
And I think it does play a lot into my art.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
this is, I think, really captures my attention when I come in the gallery.
Yeah.
All right.
This is nosy.
Ha!
He's nosy.
Love it.